Well, hello, hello. This is Jeff with Final Boss. I'm going to be doing an edit on only one work tonight as opposed to two because unfortunately I'm a little bit behind on my own editing. So I'm really excited to read this, though. This is an awesome essay by one of my very good friends, Danielle's best friend, and someone who I've found has really a lot to say. So I'm very excited to be diving into this. And it's also really fun because, oh my gosh, okay, whatever. My computer's being weird. And it's really fun because this person is very insightful. So, and I love nonfiction. Nonfiction is always a challenge, something a little bit different. Okay, so here we are, starting on a scene. I stared at the screen. Lines of code stared back to me. Bright green characters prominent against the black terminal. Normally they would be transformed by my brain. So I know what all these words mean, but terminal is definitely jargon. And what's funny is Chrissy, the writer, corrected me in my writing about this. So that goes to show that it's all a matter of perspective. And that's why everybody, even, writers who are used to this stuff or have done writing for forever always need edits because, for her, terminal is something that maybe doesn't register as jargon because it's something she uses every day. For me, I know what a terminal is. I've used one before, but it's not something I use every day, so it definitely does come across as jargon. So this is a jargon term. Is it necessary? Or is there a simpler way to say it? Also, okay to have if your goal is to have the reader feel like they're entering Yeah, and I think that's the thing to think about is like you can always break, and I guess it's like rules is a bad term, but you can always, do some things that will distance your reader a little bit if you're doing it for an effect, right? So something that will distance a reader from your writing is using jargon. Like this is something that I've experienced, using jargon that the reader doesn't understand. Sometimes that can connect, make them kind of like what I was writing in the comment. It can make them feel like they're entering a world where they don't understand everything that's going on, or that, like, oh, what is that? That's something you see a lot in fantasy novels where they, will hint at a jargonistic term like, oh, like the blah, 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 blah. And it's part of the world building. It makes you feel more part of the world. So food for thought. One thing, I stared at the screen. You already kind of have, I don't know if you need this. This is like an old screenplay trick. We assume the character narrator is staring at something when they're describing it. So you can usually just lead with the explanation rather than a direction cue. And this is like a helpful thing in screenwriting because like a lot of times, a screenwriter will, especially and I should scroll down a little bit just so y'all can see. Why is it so high up? Maybe I was wrong. There we go. Ugh. Why is it so high up? I'm going to put a few spaces here so you can actually see it. Okay. So, just get some more. I finally got a Soda Stream. I'm very excited. Chrissy is also the person who recommended me get this. Listen to this. Listen to this. Oh, what a beautiful sound that is. Oh, man. But yeah, so I was talking about how to give character directional cues, like what they're looking at, what they're thinking about, and a lot of it comes through what they describe. So in a screenplay, one of the common indications of an amateur screenplay writer, I'm not saying that this person's an amateur or whatever, but the common indications of a writer that's maybe not operating at full potential, maybe as it were, or is they'll say, what time is it? We zoom into Joe's watch and the watch reads 2:47, 5 minutes before, blah, 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 blah. So another way just to do that is to say, you know, Joe walks to the end of the street. He lifts up his wrist. You know, it's 2:47. And then we can assume that by the fact that we're getting that information, the camera will. That's a really bad example because like it's easier. That's why I like editing screenplays live, because it's easier to see it when it's like going wrong on the page. But like, you know, when you're giving all this, like the camera is looking here, and that's pretty much what I stared at. Whatever is, it's a camera direction. We're looking at a screen. But what you can usually do is just describe what's on the screen, and then the reader will assume they're looking at it. So the way I would rewrite that, you know, maybe. You know, I'll just give an example rewrite. Now I'll only do this in the beginning because we're gonna want to keep moving. But yeah. How long I've been coding for? You know, normally I'd see instructions, meaning, intention. Today. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well,
did a good job. Did a good job. You can read my notes. It had much more emotional impact than the first draft. There's just a couple little things to tighten up at the end, just to really narrow in on that emotional that moment, rather than like going back to previous things, which I will have notes on. But great job.
Fox was reading my my short story, Departures, my revision per Chrissy's notes. Well, you want to pull up a chair?
Yeah, I might actually close down.
Okay, well.
And then I will.
Yikes. Feels bad. Just kidding. No. That was, the rewrite here would be like, Rose and Rose of bright green characters fill my computer screen. How long have I been coding for? Normally I'd see instruction, meaning, intention. Today, mere symbols. Symbols begin to swim before my drooping eyes. So again, this is in resignation. Again, this is kind of a tick. Because we kind of get this, you know, a long, you know, sigh. There's probably two things. So this is good. I'm liking the way this is heading. It's very scene driven. I love that. I don't think you need this because you're already getting this feeling of exhaustion and resignation from your writing. Trust the you know, experience you're evoking. I think that's the thing. I think what's awesome, I mean, this is like kind of the stages, I think, a lot of times, and at least from my experience as I've continued to learn and write, is, you know, the first stage is kind of starting to evoke, you know, experience and the feeling and the emotion and the sensation, and then it's trusting that you've done enough, that you don't have to go and tell again what you just did such a great job evoking. So I think this is an example of, which is awesome, like saying like, hey, you've evoked like symbols that began to swim before my drooping eyes. Like, I know you're exhausted, I know you're resigned, so when, you know, you raise your eyebrows in resignation, you know, time for a break, you know, that's enough. We don't need to have the writer come in and say, hey, what this experience means is this. You've already done such a great job evoking that feeling. I'm already feeling resigned. I already feel like I want to, you know, I'm looking at, you know, I'm like, oh, now I'm tired, you know, after reading that. So you've already done such a great job. I would just cut out those explanatory things, especially when it's already, that exact thing has already been kind of created through your scene description. Raise my eyebrows and purse my lips. letting a long stream of air. Seems like a verbose way to say sigh, though I'm not sure what your intention is. This seems like a wordy way to say sigh. Can we just use the more precise noun? Or was there a purpose? So yeah, and this goes down to precision, right? Precision of noun. So I'm not sure. Like, it's such a strange. It's kind of a jarring turn of phrase. So I don't know if that's something you're intentionally doing. So that's why I'm writing a comment and not just overwriting it. But stuff like that indicates a lack of precision in writing, where a long stream of air passed between my lips. I raised my eyebrows and let out a sigh. Time for a break. That seems a little more streamlined. That would be like kind of my rewrite. Like, I'll just write it here. My rewrite. I raised my eyebrows and let out a sigh. Time for a break. And it's not letting me do italics in there, but that's what I would do. And it shortens it. It compresses, and it still gets the same thing. I set my laptop down on the coffee table. Boodly doodly doodly doo. And picked up a looped string of wooden beads. I thumbed the small cross dangling from when I began reciting the first prayer of the rosary. I believe in God, the Father Almighty. I'd taken to saying rosaries often, not so much due to the intentional upsurge in piety, but the lingering pregnancy fatigue and onset of mild apathy. Oh man, that's good. I love this verb. Such a great verb. Sorry, I'm weird. A weird thing to say, but I feel like the noun verb, the core base clause, the base clause of your sentence, the noun verb, the most important part of every sentence, unless you're doing something more experimental, which is not common in, nonfiction writing has some experimental construction in sentences, or just some like more varied construction in sentences, but usually that noun verb combo is really core. So that it's a great verb. It evokes an immediate image. It's sensory, like thumbed. It's tactile. You can feel that verb. I think that's a fantastic verb. So there. Good job. Small. Believing I felt right. I'm taking to sing rosaries often. This is really high register of language. Midsummer Matters. Man, you watch the same TV shows as my parents. I think it's a TV show, right? Midsummer Murders. I don't think it's necessarily worth cutting, but it's so normally in fiction, whenever like a narrator is coming in with a high register of language like this, it's more advanced language, it's more thought language. You kind of want to be careful because the fiction, modern fiction especially, really operates on a scene level. It's all about the play-by-play of what's happening in the scene every second or whatever. Here, though, I think it's okay because this is a nonfiction piece. So it just depends. So and that's sort of half the job of the editor is just to say, hey, look, this is what's happening. Whether or not you intend it, that's up to you. You really have to figure out what your goals are and how to drive towards that. But kind of what's happening is this is going to start zooming me out. So we've had this scene of this person exhausted working and just going and sitting with their rosary. And then, I turn to the rosary. So this is kind of an aside. This whole paragraph is an aside. I've tried taking to saying rosaries often. And then it kind of like pulls us out. And then it pulls us out further. So it goes from the active scene, So we're having her picking up the rosary, flicking through the rosary, and then it zooms out one level. I'm taken to saying rosaries often. This is the narrator commenting on the scene and kind of giving a more generalized opinion. And then we zoom out another level, which is the high register of language, which is kind of the narrator as the deific sort of narrator. You want me to put it over there so you can chime in? There you go. And then you have a very cozy fox in her delightful bathrobe. Man, this is how we get the viewers, huh? Just kidding. I'm just being facetious. Slap my hand. Fox is trying to make me the big bucks here. Yeah. It's a low cut bath. I'm just kidding. No, it's not. It's a normally cut bathrobe. Yeah. But yeah, so you're zooming us out. Whether or not that's what your intention is, it feels like perhaps not your intention because we're right back into the scene here. And I don't know how much it added. Yeah. This paragraph feels like a big aside. This is okay, and it can work, but you better make it count. Not 100% sold that it's necessary just yet. I'm going to go back to the top and read through real fast. So pretty much, I did a little rewrite for her in the first paragraph. Rows and rows of bright green characters fill my computer screen. How long had I been coding for? Normally I'd see instruction, meaning, intention. Today, mere symbols. Symbols that begin to swim before my drooping eyes. I raise my eyebrows and purse my lips. I rewrote. Yeah. Mine's more writery, I guess. Not like writer, not like, but it's more like snobby, I guess. I don't know. Moody. Yeah. My rewrite, and then the next one is I raised my eyebrows and let out a sigh. Time for a break. I sat my laptop down on the kitchen table, on the coffee table, and picked up a looping string of wooden beads. I wonder if we can just say rosary. I don't know. That's fine. I thumbed this. It seems my wooden rosary. Picked up my because I want it to be more personal. Like a looping string of wooden beads feels very like abstracted.
Unless she's new to it. Unless it's something she just started.
Yeah, exactly. Because that could be her goal. Yeah. Here, I should put it on a dual mic here so you can hear Danielle better because she's a little soft spoken. She hates being called soft spoken. It just cracks me up to get in trouble.
I'm also gonna have an unchocolate dipped truffle.
Oh, well, you can chocolate dip them, Bubba.
But I want them now.
Okay, well, you can have ice cream or something. Okay, you do you. If you want it, you want it. I should have done that over the weekend, but the weekend was just so busy. Anyways. My fingers rested on 5 beads. I'd chosen a Sorrowful Mysteries. Oh yeah, I was going to say, I wonder if this could just be rosary. The first description seems like deconstructed almost. It's like because we know, like a lot of us know the thing that's a rosary. It's a very clear image. It works as a noun. I mean, what you're doing, whether or not it's intentional, is kind of deconstructing it into its parts. A loop string of wooden beads. That's it. Kind of like and it produces the effect in this paragraph where we kind of have this vague image, and then later in the paragraph it snaps into more detail when you actually mention it's a rosary. So it's your call to have this kind of delayed payoff in terms of the noun. What you're sacrificing is a little bit of clarity. It's going to blur your scene a little bit in the beginning when it's this abstract thing that snaps into clarity later. Sort of like how you were saying in my story that you edited, that you didn't get a sense of what the character looked like. And then when you did, or when I did actually mention what the character looked like, the narrator, the speaker looked like, it disagreed with what you'd kind of pictured already, and it threw you out of the story as the reader. Same exact thing. In a smaller setting, so it's more probably palatable to the reader, but something to think about. what you're doing is you're sacrificing a little bit of clarity for a later payoff in terms of that kind of sharpening of the image later on. So you're kind of delaying the image's completion till the end of the paragraph, if that's what you want. And it works because you have the prayer kind of immediately after it. But I don't know. That's a gray area for me. I can't really say exactly what I would do in that case.
Continue.
My fingers rested on the first of the five large beads. I'd chosen the Sorrowful Mysteries, a version of which, one sorrowful event leading up to the crucifixion, I'd focus the thoughts on the first event and said, Our Father. First of the five large beads, I'd chosen the Sorrowful Mysteries, a verse. Jesus kneels in the garden to pray, anticipating the coming crucifixion, feeling the weight of all human suffering, and so bloody surrenders to the Father's plan. All right, I like this juxtaposition of the rosary and the crucifixion. I really like it. I think it's a really great device. To the passion, I guess, is the right word. Yeah. I mean, there is some risk because, like, you know, I think I would just clarify. And this is at the end, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing is I would maybe at the end of the story just clarify, like, hey, like, my journey and my sufferings is like a miniature version of what this, you know, the passion is, because, you know, that could come across, if you never clarify, like, it could come across like a little melodramatic, saying, like, you know, having a baby is, you know, just as bad as sweating blood, you know, in the passion. Like, 'cause that's a really dramatic story. Like, you know, I mean, it's the most dramatic event in human history, right? So, like, it's something to just be sure you clarify at some point. Not necessarily here, not necessarily in the next paragraph, but at some point in the story, just be like, hey, look, like, I'm not saying, like, I went through the passion here. Like, this is a little miniature version. These are those little miniature crosses that we have to go to every day. And I think that's a very reasonable thing. Like, you know, we all have to go to our little miniature crosses every day in some way, you know, and I think that, to me, feels like a really great, and I like that you have these mundane details, towels and Lysol, like stuff like that. I think that is really, really great. I think that implies that, you know, that implies that, and I don't think I'm comparing my life to the passion, but this is just my little passion that day. This is the little thing I have to walk through. I think the rest of the first 5 beads, I've chosen the Sorrowful Mysteries. I wonder if we need I'd chosen. I chose, you know, because it's the present scene. We're in the present tense. I'd taken, because we're not in this past perfect. This is a flashback. My fingers rested, or it's in past. I think it's just I chose.
Oh, what I read that is like she'd been
yeah.
She'd taken to saying rosaries often, and she'd chosen the Sorrowful Mysteries. But yeah, I can see how that'd be.
Yeah, because what we're losing, I think that the problem is, like, we already have an aside. So I agree with what you're saying. We already have this paragraph that's an entire aside. So going back to the present perfect when it doesn't need to be, or the past perfect, or the past. I'd chosen. Is that past participle? No, it's past perfect. Yeah, going back to the past perfect when we don't need to be like that. I had been doing whatever. It's still, because, like, you could I chose the Sorrowful Mysteries for this rosary that I'm doing right now. Leading up to the crucifixion, I focused my thoughts in the first, because here we are back to the present. That's the only sentence that's not in the present moment, which is the past tense, right? And our Father, and beginning to moving through the 10 Hail Marys that followed. Jesus kneels in the garden to pray, anticipating the coming crucifixion. I think this is beautiful. When the second trimester arrives, I like that you cut. I think this is such a great decision. Keep doing this. We don't need a segue here. We don't need a segue. Great decision.
Yeah.
To sharp cut into the idea behind the scene. I think that's something you're probably doing, is you're cutting between this scene where you're exhausted, you're doing your rosary, and kind of this meditation. I think that's a really great architecture. You don't need that much more artifice around it. I think just doing these types of crosscuts will be very well. So I think you're A for having a really great solid structure already in the first draft, which doesn't always happen for me, especially. I'm notoriously bad at that. Anticipating the coming crucifixion and feeling the weight. If you can, when the second trimester arrived, how the anticipated energy resurgence, I started surrendering at every turn. So surrendering means something to you. Again, this is a jargon term. It's a very Christian jargon term as opposed to a tech jargon term, but this is another jargon term. Give me a just moment of experiencing this. Evoke what's surrendering.
I think she kind of does after that.
That's actually interesting, because then this goes to an earlier note, which I was like, she is doing evoking, but it's like the second stage of show don't tell. The first stage is you always tell and you say what you're feeling. This is at least in my experience. The second stage is you show, you evoke, but then you don't trust it, so then you also tell. And then before or after your evocative description. And the last stage is you finally are like, all right, I know I'll just cut the show or the tell out,
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what's happened. That's happened to me, and you can probably still see that in my writing in various stages, but that's kind of so funny that you mentioned that. At work, I was quick to tell my coworkers that I needed a break for exercise. I attempted only the short walks and simplest yoga sequences. I let dust accumulate on the baseboards and ignored the filmy surfaces. The bathroom. Great word.
Filmy, yeah.
Oh, no. Comment, please. I think your diction has been really, really sharp. There's only been a few times where I feel like you've not gotten the right word for what you're trying to accomplish. Surface in the bathroom and kitchen are normally beelining. They normally send me beeline for 2 paper towels and Lysol. I think we only need one. So, because the more you lengthen out, so your goal, because like the revelation is happening in the present scene. You getting so exhausted, because what this is kind of leading to, and this is what I'm guessing, is you're working, you pause, you go over your rosary, you meditate for a few minutes, and in that moment you have a revelation that changes your perspective. That's what this structure is leading towards. Whether or not you're going to deliver on that, we'll find out. But that's a very common structure. One of the risks, though, is the longer you spend in that meditation, or at least like digressing, like I think this is suffering a lot from digression and these kind of tangential things, and they're okay and they are functional, but they should be the most efficient part of your story, the most leaned down. So for example, you have two examples. I ignored the filmy surfaces in the bathroom and kitchen. And kitchen is making your reader think about kitchens too now. We only really need bathroom. That's the grossest, it's the best example. So usually in a lot of those things, in the present scene, you can be more lax. When you're in the present moment, you can talk more, have multiple and the bathroom and the kitchen and the sink and the outside, and you can build it because you can create emotion in the present scene. Much harder to create emotion when you're meditating in this meditative kind of retrospective point of view. So your goal in those retrospective point of view, because it's going to be harder to create emotion, is to be efficient, is to just deliver and move on to back to the present scene, because the present scene is where you can get the emotion, where you can usually milk the emotion. It's tricky and it's different for every story, but in this case, cuts like this, like I don't need the follow-up that normally sent me beelining for paper towels and Lysol, because just the fact that you're ignoring it tells me that that's a problem, that's difficult for you to ignore it. So yeah. Okay. At first, it had been a relief to surrender, a surprising peacefulness that took over. Again, kind of like, this seems to be different, right? So at first, if I'm kind of taking Danielle's meaning, at first surrendering looks like taking a short walk versus a long walk. Now surrender means a surprising peacefulness took over. So is that like some sort of mental exercise? And this is the problem with jargon, because to you it means something. I think you're using surrender as a separate term, and these are just examples of you doing it. But again, like feels like surrender's meaning has changed from short walks to mindfulness and a peaceful feeling. As if lowering the bar of my physical well-being raised up everything else above it. Again, I congratulated myself. I feel like these two need to be combined.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Because like in some ways I feel like you have two different ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And one is like surrendering as a good thing, like being like, I know my limits. And another way is kind of like bad surrender, like obviously it won't kill you to let dust accumulate and ignore filmy surfaces, but like ultimately you do need to clean stuff. So like it's kind of bad to just let, obviously totally fine when you're tired, but ultimately if you do that for too long, then it's kind of a bad thing to like ignore those. So it's kind of like you have two different ideas, some of which are good and some of which are kind of like fine in the short term, but
I would
like
just
if you look at it in the long term, wouldn't be like necessarily good things to have like somebody who never cleans their whatever. So I think that's why it's kind of throwing us off. I mean, we clean our baseboards daily, so...
Yeah. That's gross. You're disgusting. I'm just kidding. Yuck. What kind of person does that? Just kidding. I'm not sure what my take is. So yeah, I think my goal, and I'm going to sound very startup-y, corporate-y, but it's sort of like every time you go to a slide on a slide deck, you should be able to say, what's the point of this slide in one sentence, if not a couple of words. But I can't really say what is this driving towards? Okay, so you've done some surrendering, which we're not really sure what surrendering means, and we're not really sure how you feel about it. Like, do you feel like you've been failing at surrendering? Do you feel like you've been succeeding at surrendering? Do you feel like it's not been you've had to do, and you've just kind of tried to make the best of it? Like you've just it's something that you don't feel comfortable with, but you have had to accept in the temporary. That would be something I think that's what you're trying to say. Yeah.
And you're trying to make the best of it, but I think that just needs clarifying.
Yeah, I think those paragraphs just need a bit of sharpening. 1 second. Getting all rainy and gross. Yuck.
Ew.
But yeah, I think it's just, I couldn't tell you exactly how those paragraphs are building into something. How do they fit into the overall meaning? What does that slide add to the presentation, and how does it clearly, it's like one line that's adding.
And where does the newfound serenity come from? Is it from, because I mean, some of that stuff, I wouldn't mind that stuff anyway. Why is that hard for you? Why does that bring you serenity? Is it because,
Yeah, so we're back to the scene.
And
I like
what you
this.
try to say is like lowering the bar, raised up everything else. So it sounds like you're trying to turn it into some sort of sacrificial process, maybe.
Okay, my fingers and thoughts pause. So I don't like this and thoughts because it could imply that you kind of like just like zone out. All thought stops.
That
like,
happens to me.
yeah, I mean, and not, I don't think that's your
Really?
intention. That's maybe I don't want to make fun because I think this is a really serious work and I think it's a really awesome and it's going really well. I would make this really tactile. I would just do like my fingers paused. Pause, weighing the second large bead, or maybe it's like I pause, I paused, weighing the second large bead between my thumb and
Sort of that.
oh yeah. That's a bad example, but I think that when you go into physical description, when you go into something that's like touch, feel, sense, it implies that you're coming out of the thought sphere, so it's kind of taking you out of the mind back into the scene, and then you can kind of go back into the mind by just saying. You don't need to say, I'm stopping thinking now, I'm going back to tactile feeling or the rosary. You can just say, I paused at the second large bead. I paused, weighing the second large bead between my thumb and index finger. Jesus is falsely accused, bound to a pillar, and scourged for his crimes he did commit. He bears the physical suffering without complaint. That's serenity. What's serenity?
A newfound serenity, which is why I think it's important to
again, this is spaced out. Wait. Okay, so first I've never relief of surrender. After pausing after each room, I found myself grasping for words, normally well within reach, pausing after entering each room. What did I come here to do? At work, I could no longer feed my brain rapid inputs and expect the internal machinery. Instead, I felt like I was manually operating at each cogwheel, jiggling and unjamming parts at each step. I like the alliterate or the consonants there. It really works. Jiggling and unjamming. Because the J is a very abrupt sound. So whenever you alliterate a sound or whenever you use consonants on a sound, it's going to make that sound, obviously, become way more prominent. So something like alliterating an S, like smooth snakes, just makes will make that sibilant sound, like an S sound, make the sentence flow a lot faster. Alliterating a jarring sound, like it's not a plosive because P's are plosives. I forget what the J's are called. But those are a harder sound. And so by doing that, it'll make that feel of the cogwheel jamming really more experienced. So that's kind of the cheat code way of making thoughts and like kind of like the mind, like, whenever you're relying more on a retrospective narrator, a narrator that's going back and thinking about something, that's very dramatically crippling in some ways because they're safe. Nothing is going on in the present scene. They're going back and thinking and thinking and thinking. So it's a very, it's not the most exciting thing, or it's not the most narratively forward-driving thing. So the way to make that really punch is kind of like what you're doing here, which is using language to just make us feel that thought so much that it feels real.
While he's talking, I'm just rereading through it and thinking what might work. I almost feel like you don't need to even talk about like I congratulated myself on this newfound serenity. I think like it even works to just end it on as if lowering the bar, raised up everything else, and then you move to the next thing, and then you don't even need to say, you can just say, I noticed new changes. I found myself grasping for words, because like it's almost like trying to come to like an ending statement really early, which obviously it's not, but then you take it back anyways. Like it begins to evaporate anyways. So I don't even think you need it. I think because they're kind of distinct sections of something that's occurring, I think that weakens it to try and like come to a serenity. Even if you felt like it at the time, I think it story-wise, I don't think it works.
I think we do need some sort of time.
Well, she does say the second trimester.
Yeah, but I feel like this pulls us back into the present scene. I feel like this transition, I don't really know if it's a time. I feel like this transition is not as smooth as I feels like it needs another look. Don't know exactly what I would say. My intuition is it needs some sort of cue that we're going back into her retro, because we're like grasping for words. When? After the first trimester? During one of her walks? During the simplest yoga sequences?
During the second trimester.
Yeah, I know, but like with entering each room, where are these rooms? Like, is this like in the office? That Serenity, you know, once I got back to the office, all Serenity faded, you know. All Serenity, you
I don't
know.
know if you need that. That doesn't.
Again.
That seems weird to me. What does the office have to do with anything?
Well, because that's where, like, you know, because we even have that cue at work. I can no longer feel my brain. Because this cue really should be at the beginning,
She was
right?
never not at the office, though.
Well, she's at a home office up here. Right? Well, maybe. I don't know. All I'm saying is this is like the clunky, you know, just me making something up off the cuff example. But I think there needs to be some just like, we're back in the past, and this is where we are in the past. You know, because this, you know, the easiest question I could ask is like, is this a just general summary like this? Or is this something specific? Is it a specific day? Because this is like a general summary of second trimester. This is in general second trimester. I can't really tell. Is this still in general second trimester?
That's how I read it, yeah.
But there's these very concrete, you know, there's very concrete things in here though. And this is the thing. The fact that we're both reading it differently, no matter what either of us say.
At work, you know.
Exactly. We have another at work down here. Yeah.
Things.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like I found myself grasping for words normally well within mental reach. Is this in general? Is this in like a particular sequence? Pausing after entering each room. You don't enter a room, you know, what did I come here to do? I don't know. This paragraph, I think, needs more of a lead in, and I would almost think it needs a little bit of tweaking internally in its internal structure. I could go back and give it a little bit more, you know, this is kind of like the live, you know, sort of quick edit, you know, but, you know, if we were really going in detail, we could roll up our sleeves and try to figure out like what exactly is breaking in this. I do think it's just, where does this fit? Like, these are really concrete descriptions. If I was to kind of say what's the biggest challenge, these feel like really concrete, you know, this happened last week descriptions, but we're still in this generalized past perfect. Why not just describe a really rough day at the office? You know, don't know.
Just for my 2 cents, I like it the way it is. Okay. I like the kind of generalized sort of feeling of it. Where it's like, yeah, it may not have been every day, but like it happened enough that it was like something you were noticing. And maybe you can't even, like, it's one of those things that just is happening more often than you can't even remember specific instances, but you're just like, man, I feel like my brain isn't working as smoothly. That's kind of the sense I get. And it almost gives me that sense of feeling like my own brain is jogged up while reading it, which I think is strong. Yeah,
that's a great point. You know, the fact that it is a little bit less connected and cogent in some ways evokes that feeling of kind of like disassociate. You know?
I don't think it would hurt to like. I don't think you need to like specify like a specific day.
No,
it probably wouldn't hurt to say like like at work or something like that.
You know, I think
you did these at work there, but like
I mean, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know exactly what you meant by.
Yeah, to me, it could be just moving this at work to up here. At work, all Serenity faded as I noticed new changes. You know, whatever that means. Like, because it could be just this little brief thing. You know, once I got back to the office, it's bad. Maybe you don't like it. This little at work tag is enough. Maybe that just needs to go at the beginning. I just felt that there was not a smooth transition between this and that. The other stuff, though, I'm more ambivalent around. I do feel like there's something that's not clicking 100% for me in that paragraph. Though I think the imagery is beautiful, and I would definitely keep it. Another great verb, deftly juggle tasks, alternated focus, you know, yeah, great. I think those are really solid. The third B, Jesus brought before the crowds, a crown of thorns pressed into his skull, he submits to humiliation. I felt to wear a lizard slap in the face for pride. Okay, so this is
Again, she references the Serenity.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Serenity needs to, what does that mean to you? I think there really needs to be like a
either take it out or have it very like
yeah. It's tough.
I would take it out.
To your emotions here and follow and track with you. Since I'm not really clicking on what this noun means. Yeah, it's tough because that one word you're leaning on it so much, which I think is okay, but because it hasn't had like a clear definition earlier on in the work, it's starting to kind of undermine some of the other kind of things you're doing with like by building on something that's not really a solid foundation, like the man who built his house on sand versus the man who built his house on solid ground. See, I can make biblical references during a meditation on the rosary.
And I don't know what you mean by this, the added setback. That.
Yeah, what was the added setback?
I think you mean the like brain fog, but that's not clear at all there.
Brain fog, yeah.
Because like. Yeah, because like.
Felt heavy.
Yeah, I feel like you don't really describe it as a setback. You're more just describing it.
Yeah, I knew how lucky I was, but instead of feeling gratitude, I felt heavy. Again, I want to know what this means. Instead of, bowing in faithful thankfulness to the life within me. Whatever. That's a very exaggerated, I felt,
weighed down.
I kicked every pebble I could find. Why the heck did this have to happen to me? That's a silly, that's a very silly thing, but that's maybe a more evocative, because we're, evoking, why me? That feeling of anger, and you're not. Heaviness is different. That's not heavy. I know I'm evoking a different emotion. I just couldn't think of something heavy. Why have I been staring at the wall for 20 minutes? I don't know. I envisioned the rest of, envisioned. Always a began envisioning or a started doing, unless it's interrupted, just cut it. The only time you needed a began or started doing is when that action is interrupted. Like, I started to pinch Fox's nose, but she bit my hand instead. Whatever. So that's interrupted action. You can sometimes do it. Hopefully don't, because again, it goes down to making that base clause, the core noun-verb combination of your sentence, as efficient as possible. And anytime you're separating the verb, or like started going or went happy, now I can't think of anything because I'm tired. Began envisioning, those types of things weaken your things. You won't be pitching Fox's nose again. Well, that's true. That's true. I've learned my lesson. Err in my ways. How's it going, Joji? Welcome. Doing some nonfiction editing, so that should be a lot of fun. The rest and even the early years of parenthood with minor dread. I felt guilty at the prospect of continuing to work while unable to give it my full brain power and dedication. I felt disengaged with my work now. How's it going to feel after sleepless nights with an infant crying? Trust me, that's a scary thought. Is this a nonfiction piece? Cool, I know, exactly. If you write nonfiction, this is a fun thing. The great thing I love about editing nonfiction is it gives us a lot more time, because nonfiction relies, especially modern nonfiction, relies a lot more heavily on language and the use of language to carry its drama, because usually life is not as exciting as, aliens jumping onto a human planet and trying to take over. Sometimes real life is a little more mundane. So then, the writer generally has to rely more on evocative language, on using more devices, like word sound, stuff like that, to hopefully make their writing still have that same narrative engagement. I felt guilty at the prospect of continuing to work. This needs more aliens. That's true. That's true. With minor dread, I felt guilty at the prospect of working. Yeah, like this feels like the core. The core. This feels like the heart of the problem of the story. You know, because it's like, because we always ask that question, what's the narrator's issue that this, story solve? It's like, feeling bad about being freaked out that your kid is going to make you miserable for a little bit. Slash forever.
Hand.
Just kidding. But no, I think that's that. Okay, so then there's a question. So this really feels like the core of your story. You've done a good job building up to it. And I think your pacing is okay. I think that you should be a lot more precise in how you're pacing towards this. So I think it's okay for this to be almost at the end of your story, because we're just getting to your realization right before the end. I would say that's almost a little too late. Maybe it comes down here, right around here a little bit more, perhaps, but not the end of the world. The thing that I think you definitely need to do is to make guilt at hardship pivotal in all these other things. Like this serenity, I think, is what that's supposed to mean. Like, I wanted to be frustrated. I wanted to be annoyed. But I told myself, for my child, I will persevere. And I will go to the cross. And, and then page 2, I kept trying. And it got harder, though. So it was harder for me to have this perseverant thing. And then when I actually succumb to it and say, I actually just feel really sad about the fact and heavy and scared that I'm going to have a kid. I can't push through this emotion. I feel shame and guilt because I should be, the knight in shining armor. I should be this person that everybody in the books is like. And I think that's what this realization is about that, yeah, there's hardship, but this time it's not going to be, or maybe just pushing through it isn't working anymore. And that to me seems like a really interesting revelation. Mm-hmm. But right now it's not being set up clearly.
Yeah, I think you're trying with the serenity thing, but I agree that it needs to focus more on why you're focusing on serenity, which is to avoid kind of admitting that it's hard. You're trying to be like, okay, I'm going to use hardship I'll push through it and I'll grow from it. But really, you're scared, you're tired, you feel bad and guilty. I think that'll help crystallize what you mean by like serenity. It's like trying to avoid that.
What's the topic? So this is the premise of this is a person coming out of their first trimester, but finding that a lot of the inconveniences and the uncomfortable sickness and the discomfort and the pain
and the
fear still hasn't really gone away. And then hoping that like by persevering through the first trimester and having this hope, it would kind of resolve it all very simply and easily. But they're kind of finding that, oh, hey, I still feel crappy and I still feel really scared, and I'm just getting the gravity of how much I'm sacrificing. And some part of me doesn't like that. Some part of me wants to have my old life back, and then dealing with guilt at having that feeling.
Yeah, and I think like the kind of binding thing is like for going through the rosary.
Okay,
and
too.
Kind of facing these things.
But maybe you do wish you didn't have to experience all this suffering and talking about why, like wanting to run away from discomfort makes you feel guilty. I think it's a really great thing because like you're asking here is to say,
I feel really guilty. I mean, this is going to literally make my life really hard. I know that, and I've been trying to push through it, but I really can't. I just have to accept the fact that this is going to be painful, it's going to be hard, and I don't like it. And sometimes I want to go back to my old life. But whenever I actually say that, it makes me feel terribly guilty and terribly unwhatever. Maybe that's something that's interesting. Choosing not to work when I had every advantage to do so, a job that I always loved, the ability to work from home, in-laws to help with childcare. I kept my fingers moving as I arrived at the fourth mystery. Exhausted, wounded, starving. Carried the cross through the jeering crowds to the place where he knew he'd be nailed upon it. I was getting ahead of myself, and I knew it. I couldn't foresee what the next 6 months would be like, or the months after that. 6 months ago, if I'd known the first trimester, I would have thought it would be unbearable. But meditating on this very same rosary event during that period, I realized there was a place between happiness and gloom that could sit when things weren't what I wanted them to be. Moving my fingers across the beads now, I realized I didn't have to have answers for how I would deal with the future. I was exhausted not by the small cross I was currently with, but by trying to carry... Oh, okay, good. We have the small cross. I'm glad, because I think it's good. A small cross of pain. I just clarified that it's not like actual small cross you're holding, like currently carrying, because you are, by holding a rosary, in fact, carrying a small cross. So just, discomfort, whatever. I was trying to carry all the imagined futures at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting. So you're like, so the resolution is, I'm focusing on the now rather than the what ifs. So maybe this is me personally, but and obviously this is pure writerly hijacking. So I don't want to hijack your story. If you disagree with this in any way, ignore what I'm about to say. I think one of the most interesting things that you've brought up in this paper so far is the guilt at not liking the suffering. Because I think, and you still really haven't resolved it, because you're saying I'm pushing through, and then this paragraph is about continuing to push through by just focusing on my current pain rather than thinking about the future. But I think the question that's interesting me the most is like, why do you feel guilty if it's bad? What's wrong with the emotions where you can't just say, this is uncomfortable, I wish I wasn't feeling this, it sucks? And why do you have to be a hero? And why do you have shame when you feel like you're not being a hero? Or you're, that is the most interesting thing in this paper so far. That's the irony. That's the thing that I feel like Chrissy is still grappling with, because in the next paragraph where it's supposed to be a resolution, that's not the issue. That's like the issue you brought up over here, but we're still just kind of saying, I'm just going to reduce the present suffering, or kind of like focus on the minimum. And I think that's like the thing that I would like ask, because that's really fascinating to me. But again, if that's not your point, if that's not what you're going for, ignore it. That's a content and thematic level question. That's just as a friend to a friend.
Could be something interesting though.
But yeah, but like, what's wrong with wishing you like, because I think, this is like an extreme example. So like, but what's wrong with being like, man, sometimes I wish I hadn't had this kid right now. That's obviously a big thing, and you love your kid and you're going to deal with it. And you might not feel that way, but like, I think it's okay for someone to feel that way. I think it's okay if Danielle is like, some days is like, man, I wish I hadn't married Jeff. He sucks. Some days he really sucks. I think that's an okay feeling for her to have, and I hope she doesn't feel guilty. I know that she's going to still be true to her vows, and I know that she's going to still see it through to the end. And I know that you're going to do the same thing for your kid. I know that you're going to see it through to the end. But I think that that's an emotion that it seems like you're avoiding from reading this. Where I'm like, why doesn't, what's wrong? Like, you're saying I'm feeling guilty whenever I'm actually like just bearing down into the heaviness of what I've signed myself up for. Why isn't it okay just to be in that moment? Why do you have to saddle up and sally forward every time? That to me is a really interesting question.
I agree. I think it's even if it's not where you think even if like predominantly you feel like okay and ultimately like positive, I think it's just an important area, because I think a lot of people just focus in on like pushing through pregnancy and like the glorious wonder of it, which obviously it is. It's like, it's crazy. You're making a human and you end up with this person that like you love and loves you, but there is something heavy and scary about it. And I think it's probably important in a way to focus more on that and to make it okay.
Like one of my very good friends is having a kid in the middle of a very busy time where she's doing a startup. It's a very chaotic time. It's a very difficult time. They were not trying. But she's like, I hate that everyone's so happy. I feel horrible, stressed, miserable. I mean, I'm still going to see it through. I'm still going to have the kid. But why can't people just say, that sucks? Why does it have to be this kind of edifice of look at how okay I'm doing?
And obviously,
and I'm not saying that this is the case.
Yeah, and obviously, I know you guys are like so excited, so it's not like I think that you guys are like sitting there like, what have we done?
But it's both. Well, why can't we be excited about new life and grieve the life that you're giving up, because you're giving up your life, and that's the whole point of child rearing is you're giving up your life for this kid. Why can't you grieve that as well as be hopeful? Why is there no place for grief in this essay?
I agree, and I think you like bring it in for a moment, and I think it would be nice to see it fleshed out just because it is like refreshing.
Yeah,
I think it's something. You made me gain 50 pounds.
Exactly. Like, what the heck, kid? What's going on?
It is like literally for literally the rest of your life, it won't be the same. Like even when your kid's out of the house, you'll still have a kid. You know. You'll still have a person that you're worried about that you'll want to come home and visit, that might ask you for money. You know, like
hey mom.
It is crazy, and obviously it's wonderful, and it's this person that you're God calls us to create, and blah 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 blah. But no, I think I agree that there is something really powerful about the heaviness of that, and I think especially because you're going through the rosary in this, that focusing on the heaviness of it is almost like very apropos, like it's very fitting.
Yeah, and especially because you're contrasting this against the cross, right? Which is exactly that. It's like it's the most horrific and the most beautiful thing in that tradition, right? And this is the thing, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. Like, he's crowned with the crown of thorns. Like, that's extremely dark. And I feel like this, like, renewed, like, I felt a renewed sense of optimism. Like, that feels like a little bit of a tonal shift. Like, it feels like you're bringing in, like, and it's funny because I sense that you're subconsciously bringing in the passion because it hurts that and it's so painful and you're grieving the life you're going to give up so much. So, but then you're I feel like this feels a little less authentic. I let out a deep breath. I was still tired, still daunted by the rest of the day of the week. A renewed sense of optimism, reminded by the character of a God. And I think this is the heart. Like, okay, God suffered. Mm-hmm. He added a final prayer of thanks. Well, it's not. So, okay, and added a final prayer of thanks. This strange God, this strange example. Yeah, because but this is the example of death, the example of dying, of losing one's life, freedom,
for love.
Choices for love, but that feels bigger than a renewed sense of optimism. Maybe
I think it's
just letting that life die, that old life with its good and its ups and its downs, laying it on a cross.
Yeah.
I think that's, I'm not going to give that many line edits here because I think that there is a structural issue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think there's a thematic. I mean, whether or not you go with kind of what Moore and Danielle and I are saying.
Maybe you're like, oh God, no, I don't feel that way. Maybe you're like, I'm literally overjoyed and I'm not guilty. I don't mean that. Whatever.
Yeah. Fine. I think that's totally fine. I think what is happening though is there's a bifurcation of theme toward the end here, where we're getting this extremely, because this is visceral, like the passion is something that's extremely visceral, extremely raw, and it's extremely dark, and it's this one of the deepest ironies in history, and then it's kind of getting juxtaposed by a deep breath. I was still tired, I was still daunted, felt a renewed sense of optimism, and that feels a little like, this is like, I think because the problem I'm sensing is this is an emotional resolve. This is this is an emotional resolution, not a resurrection. Not a true death. And I think that's the challenge when you're contrasting a true death, right? Like, in the passion story that you're evoking here, that character of Christ is really dying. He doesn't just feel bad. He doesn't just feel crummy. There's a real death happening. And I think what's happening is by your character's resolution in this story is an emotional resolution. I was feeling blue. I was feeling stressed. And then it's like this, like a renewed sense of optimism. So you never acknowledge the death. I don't really feel that death has been acknowledged by the character. It's just been kind of put aside or ignored or kind of, oh, I feel better. I'm going to perk back up. There isn't really an acknowledgement of the death in the character's journey. And I always, in nonfiction, once it's written, just think of it as a character. Don't think of it as yourself, because it will make you less objective. So just think of it as, this is a character I have to develop, because eventually it is, because you can never really capture you, a complex person, as a real evoked person on a page. You can never fully capture a person. So remember, this is a character. So this character's journey resolves in a emotional layer. I was feeling bad. I felt better. But it never really, but the passion journey evolves in like a physical death. There is a death at the end of it. I don't feel like there's been a death at this character. This character has not experienced death. She's experienced a tough day. I want to feel this character experience death before I can compare that person's journey to a death. I
agree. I think that'll make it really strong.
Yeah, she's not come to the end of her rope or seen her own brokenness or been broken. In fact, her recovery felt very, felt a little too bright,
I feel
too
guilty about
fast.
this. I feel guilty about that. But let's just put that under the rug for now, because I don't really know yet. And I'll just be optimistic. And it's like, I still feel that, but I'm just going to kind of sweep it under the rug for now.
I think that would be very functional. That would work as an essay if you were not using the artifice of a crucifixion, a crucifixion rosary. Because whenever you're matching something, you're telling me that they're going to be on the same journey. And the journey to the cross is a journey towards death for love. It's a journey toward death, putting something to death for love. And I'm not getting that sense. I'm getting the sense of like this kind of more like, ooh, it's hard. I'm still uncomfortable, but I'm just going to not think about it. Or I'm going to just think about how today was uncomfortable and not how tomorrow might be more uncomfortable. And you hinted at it and you got so close to it, which is like why I'm kind of harping on this a little bit. Because we get this, like this guilt, this heaviness, there's something. That's the thing. In this paragraph, there is something you can't escape.
Yeah, there's no resolution to that.
There's something you're not going to get away from. Like, this baby is going to change your life forever. It is a true death of somebody that you were. That person you were before you had a kid is gone forever. And that is something real and concrete. And that's something that is like, it's just like hinted at here, and like it's like it's there, but even down here you're like
moving my fingers across. I realized I didn't have the answers.
Yeah.
It's like, you're pretty much just kind of like, I can't think about it yet.
Yeah.
I can't think about it.
Yeah, and I think that's it's an okay resolution. But that's an okay resolution if you take out all the passion stuff, because that's just like, oh, hey, I'm having a challenging time thinking about this, which I don't think you want to do. I think that you're a brave writer and you're going to get the rawest emotion you can get. What's the emotion you're embarrassed about your mom reading? Are you embarrassed that if your mom reads it, that you're frustrated at having a kid? That's okay. I'm not saying that you are. I mean, you're still going to have it, but like, what's the emotion you're afraid of admitting? That's what I want to read. Or else I can read, this is going to, I'm going to be hyperbolistic. So I'm not going to do it because I don't want to be too, blasé about someone else's work, because you did a lot of hard work here. But yeah, it feels a little glossy right now. Mm-hmm. It's not real emotion I'm getting here.
At least at the end.
Yeah, at the end especially. But the things that I feel, like, I think that you're intuiting, like your subconscious wants real emotion in there. So you put the passion story in, which I think was an amazing decision as a writer. But it's just like, but then the actual content of your journey isn't matching up with that.
Yeah, but
very
I think
raw.
It's moving in that direction. I think early on you bring us through some of these things that you're struggling with, and you just kind of bring them up very honestly, and you're like, hey, this is hard, and then you go through into your guilt. And I think even when you talk about like trying to be serene, as we've mentioned, I think that's like a hint at what you're trying to do, like subconsciously, possibly, like subconsciously being like, okay, like how do I deal with, the difficultness of this, the fact that my life is going to change, and the fact that like this is not fun, it makes me feel guilty, and it's kind of like, I know, trying to like look at it as trying to like change it into something that it kind of can't be, like you're not going to feel serene. Maybe some people do, I don't know. It just seems like that's the message you're trying to get across, is that trying to force something to seem serene is just morphing the fact that it's hard and you feel bad that it's hard. At least that's how it's coming off right now, until we get to the end, and then you kind of just gloss it over.
Do not line. I watched this clip on Facebook or Twitter of this guy watching his wife give birth, trying to look and see what's happening and turn away as he gagged. Oh, one of my friends, 667, how's it going? Welcome. Good. I'm gonna switch gears to editing my work. I'm editing someone else's work, so I might pause the stream, turn it back on, just so I have this as a video for that person. Oh yeah, we should pause.
After this, yeah.
Yeah. Good. We're doing a little edit on a nonfiction, which I always love. But I think in nonfiction, you have to get to the emotion you're afraid of. What about this journey? What are you afraid to write about? I feel like there's something. This is going to be maybe like, I've read a lot of works. I know the stream, everyone loved it. Feeling good. That's awesome. Yeah, 667. Congrats, dude. Feeling great. That's fantastic.
What happened?
Oh, he shared his first chapter out, and he had a lot of really great feedback and positive response. There's no greater feeling. That's fantastic. Well, that's awesome. Celebrate that. That's amazing. Great job.
Woohoo!
I mean, that's all you can ask. It may not make everybody happy, but if it made a few people just really enjoy your work, that's a great thing, and that's fantastic.
Woo woo!
Yeah, heck yeah. Give yourself a round of applause, man. That's fantastic. Well, great job, dude. You're hard. You've been working very hard. You've been working extremely hard, and that hard work pays off in writing. So great job. Yeah. Any other things you think Chrissy should think about as she goes about her revision?
No, I think that's it. I think it's good. It just, yeah, we already said it all.
Yeah. Okay. Chrissy, great job on your story. People watching on stream, I'm going to turn the stream off for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it back on. So I'll be right back editing my story. So don't hold your breath.
Just as brutally honest.
I'll be just as brutally honest with mine. So, but yeah, don't go anywhere. I will be right back after these messages. I know I'm a sellout. Just kidding. All right, see you later, everybody. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere.